Hello, this is Cynthia Mazzaferro with Powerful Beyond Measure, and I am delighted to have another wonderful, famous author. His name is Dr. Clark Gaither. How are you, Doctor?
I'm good, very good. I'm
Good.
right now. I'm hanging out in the mountains of North Carolina, so life's wonderful.
Wow, beautiful. How beautiful. I know I've never been to North Carolina, but I'm actually looking at maybe getting another house, and I don't know if I want to go North Carolina, South Carolina, or Florida. So we need to do some kind of area searching.
You need to check out the Asheville area for sure.
Well, I'll have to get back to you on that on a different note. So this is great. But let me tell the audience a little bit more about you personally before we actually dive deep into your new book, which I'm really excited to talk about today.
Sure.
So Dr. Clark Gaither is a board-certified family physician. He's a fellow of the American Academy of Family Physicians and medical director of the North Carolina Physicians Health Program. That's a mouthful, but did you hear medical director? So that's pretty prestigious. He has extensive knowledge and experience in the arena of professional job-related burnout. He is an avid writer and has authored 3 other books. He is also an accomplished blogger, keynote speaker, corporate consultant, and personal life coach. In 2016, he was awarded his home state's highest honor for dedicated community service and volunteerism in North Carolina's Order for the Longleaf Pine. So congratulations on all your accomplishments, and that's really wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So let's start with you. You're a doctor. Are you still a practicing family physician?
No, actually, I left clinical medicine in April of 2016. April 29th was my last day seeing patients in a clinical setting. That's when I became medical director at the NCPHP. I decided I wanted to end my career on a different note, and I'd practiced family medicine for 27 years, and so I felt it was time for a change.
Wonderful. So why don't you first, if you have a copy of your book, let's start with your
I
book.
do.
We have lots to discuss about it. Look at this amazing book. Doesn't that sound good? Reignite. And it's really transform. What is the second subtitle for it? You took it down too quick for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's transformed from burned out to on fire and find new meaning in your career and life.
And I think this is so important because I have found that personally, but also with people I work with and in my workshops and speaking engagements, that we timeline is not a flat line. We have ups and downs, cycles and rhythms, whether it's a student,
Absolutely.
partners, marriage, mother, father, professional career, and you keep having to change and our roles change, and we need to continue to find out what is our purpose and passion. And if you don't get that change, it really frustrates you. So tell us why you wrote this book. What's important for you about this book?
Well, in 2009, I went to my practice partner and I said, if something doesn't change, I'm going to have to leave medicine. I felt exhausted all the time. I no longer got that satisfaction I once had in seeing patients and practicing medicine. I didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd become cynical and detached from my patients and my staff. And I can't say that I really felt depressed, but I knew I didn't feel right. I didn't feel normal. Something was wrong. And so I went online and I figured out that I was probably burned out. And my partner didn't want me to leave. He said, look, do whatever you need to do. Just don't leave, because we had a busy practice. And so I made a few changes right away. I took a pay cut and went to 3 days a week. Now, I like making money just like anybody else, but at some point, depending on the circumstance, money becomes a much lesser issue. I would have paid somebody to make me feel better, so I paid myself by taking 2 days a week off and just working 3 days. They were a little longer days, but I was off on Mondays and Fridays and, of course, the weekends. So I was working 3 and off 4. I was on a half a dozen boards that I didn't really care about 5 of them. So I got off those and stayed on the one I did care about. And I started exercising again. I started reading outside of medicine. I started getting more rest and eating better. And the transformation was amazing. In 3 weeks, I felt like a new person. I thought, wow, this is awesome. This is the way I used to feel. And I actually looked forward to going to work again. And I looked, also to my time off and enjoy that. I felt so bad before, I couldn't even enjoy the weekend off because I was already dreading Monday by Friday evening. And so just, but anyway, I felt so much better. And I thought, wow, I wonder if any of my colleagues feel like this. And so I went online again, and it didn't take but a 5-minute Google search to figure out that this is a big, huge problem in medicine. It's also a big, huge job-related burnout. It's a big problem in certain careers like social workers, firefighters, police officers, teachers. The burnout rates are high and climbing. And so I started reading what I could about burnout, and somebody asked me to do a talk one time. I did that. It was well received. And so that led to another talk and another talk. You know how it goes. And so a few years later, I was probably an expert in job-related burnout because I'd done so much work in that arena. And I started a blog.
Right. So let me stop you there, Clark. So what causes someone to experience burnout? Let's really get down to that. So someone, I mean, often we have the routine of going to work. We get stuck in that routine, and whether it's our boss or whether we're our own entrepreneur, a self worker like yourself, we're always putting out effort and the time. There's only so much time in the day. So what is really causing us to feel burned out?
Well, it depends on whether it's the individual that burned themselves out or it was their work environment that burned them out. Now, I will tell you that only 10% of the time does the individual burn themselves out. And there's lots of reasons that happens. Workaholism is probably up on the top of the list. You know, if all you have to look forward to is work, after a while, life loses its zest. And drugs, alcohol, bad behaviors, addictive behaviors, they can burn somebody out fairly quickly. But 90% of the time, it's the work environment that burns people out. And there are 6 major causes of professional job-related burnout, 6 underlying causes. And this was all figured out by a woman by the name of Cynthia Mazzaferro back in the 80s. And she's did a lot of PhD work in job-related burnout. So those 6 causes, wherever they're present, if they're being negatively impacted, you can take an on-fire, dedicated person, passion-driven person, and burn them out every time. Folks burn out at different rates, but if you put someone who's not burned out in a toxic work environment, they will burn out eventually. So would you like...
I was going to say, funny that you're saying that. My son, who is graduating from medical school, is starting his residency in another month at UPenn. And like all hospitals, you know, these residents are supposed to be able to work 80 hours a week, which is, right. You know, that's what the medical board allows them to work at these residents' hospitals. So, I mean, talk about burnout or exhaustion at the work environment.
Yeah, well, that's one of the causes is work overload.
Right.
In fact, that's the first one, work overload. When you set so much work on people's desks that they can't get to it, and they have to come back the next day and finish up what was left the day before, then more work gets put on their desk. And, you know, as companies have downsized, that usually means that you have to do more for less.
Right.
So when somebody leaves, somebody's got to do the work. And so I think people are stretched about as far as they can be stretched. That's particularly true in medicine. Work overload is a big, huge issue. And then the second one is a lack of control. Your son's going to have no control over his schedule in residency. They're going to tell him to show up, and he better. So, but, you know, there's a centralized control. And so, after a while, that stifles innovation and creativity at the individual level. And so that can be very demoralizing when the employee knows what needs to be done, but they can't do it because it's against company policy. It's a big driver of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one is insufficient reward. People take jobs for different reasons, tangible and intangible rewards. And if you feel you're not getting rewarded for the work you do, that's another big contributor to burnout. Number 4 is breakdown of community. When you feel isolated and alone in what you do, the work you do, if you're off in some little cubicle by yourself and there's no connectivity between you and the other employees, then people feel isolated, and that's not good. Absence of fairness is number 5. If you have been denied a raise 3 years in a row and they tell you because the company says we can't afford it, but then the boss or CEO gets a big fat bonus,
right.
That's absence of fairness.
Right.
And the last one, which was a big one for me, is conflicting values. And that's where you feel like what you do does not align with your core values, your core being, what you stand for. Some companies, it's so bad, they will ask employees to be deceitful. And that will drive people away in droves quickly. For me, it was every day I went to work, I felt like I was violating my oath because more and more often payers, insurance companies, outside agencies were making medical decisions without my permission or the patient's permission, and yet I was party to it. And I know my patients, some of them were harmed because of it. And the conflicting values got under my skin quite a bit. So those are the 6. Work overload, lack of control, insufficient reward, breakdown of community, absence of fairness, and conflicting values.
I think everyone, whether you're in the medical profession or a different profession, that we can all relate to that at some level, and how that can just rip us apart inside. You feel like you're worthless, you're not valued, you're not listened, you feel overworked, overabused, and all of that is our internal health that is really making us feel despondent, dysfunctional, disappointed, and we might start those addictive behaviors that are so disruptive to our lifestyle, our families, relationships, work as well. So it's so important that we try to find balance. And I award you, I really commend you for acknowledging that you were going down a path that you knew you needed to do something, or you weren't going to survive. Really,
It
happened.
You touched on it a moment ago. We go through different seasons of our life.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, if you're listening to this and you're in your 30s, your values in your 50s or 60s are going to change. And it's because we enter different seasons of our life and we value different things differently depending on the season. And so people can float in and out of burnout for that reason, just because we're getting older and what once was a good fit for us no longer is. Or perhaps there's a change in administration and things get terrible. They were great, and then the new person comes in and they're terrible for a while, but then they move on and then they're great again. And so people can float in and out of burnout. What can be very devastating or destructive even is if you're in a toxic work environment, but you've gotten that burned out mindset that says, it's too late for me. I can't change now. I've got too much invested in this company. I don't have the right skills. It's not the right time. There's all these roadblocks we put in front of ourselves.
Right.
But if you continue to show up day after day burned out, and you put your head down and you just grind away for 15, 20, 30 years, what you end up is bitter and angry and resentful because life didn't hand you what you thought it was going to hand you or give you. And that's no way to live this one life.
No, it's not.
And
I love the way you talked about seasons, and when I was talking about the time continuum. And I think a great way to look at that is every season has its beauty, and even the winter. And so that as we go through our lifespan and we change in our seasons, that we need to be willing to go through that new season. And what's the beauty in that? Whether it's a job shift, whether it's a different focus, maybe less hours, whatever. But to look at each season in our life with a different vision and purpose and passion, and how do you want to experience that time in your life? And I think that's a beautiful way of saying. I like the word using seasons.
Yeah. So one of the things that is peculiar about burnout is it looks like stress.
Mm-hmm.
If you're burned out, I can say with 100% assurance you're stressed. But you can be stressed without being burned out.
Right.
And so if you treat burnout as if it were stress, you really haven't changed the underlying causes, and you're likely not to have any improvement in your symptoms. I mean, things like yoga and mindfulness and meditation can help alleviate the symptoms people are having temporarily.
Right.
But even if you get to where you're feeling better and you go back to that same toxic work environment, it'll still burn you out. So with stress, the damage is primarily physical. With burnout, it's primarily emotional. So there's high rates of depression in people who are burned out chronically, and depression can lead to suicide. So suicide rates are much higher in burned out individuals than just stressed individuals. Right. And that's particularly bad in medicine. There are over 400 physicians committed suicide last year in the U.S.
Is that right?
Yeah, which makes it much higher than the general population. And so a lot of the reason is they're burned out.
Amazing. Wow, I didn't realize it was that high.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you brought up a word that is very kin to me, and that is emotional health. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need to understand that why we tend to work so hard, that puts us in this burnout potential category that can really impact our life, is because often we're trying to reach something. We're either trying to be well respected by our peers, to be acknowledged, to reach a pinnacle, which says, oh, I've reached a certain level and then I've achieved success. And again, I think these are falsehoods in that, if you view your life as I've reached a position, a place in life because I have so much joy, and it's not a external trophy you're holding, but more an internal reward of what you really wanted to experience and achieve in your life, then there's a more emotional satisfaction. It's not, negative emotions that we feel through life. And so having that internal emotional gratification is so important.
Yeah, I like how you said all of that, because it's very true. And it gets back to what we were talking about earlier about seasons. When you're young and just starting out, you want all the ubiquitous stuff. You want the car and the big salary and the house and, kids in private school and all that stuff. And then as you get older, you figure out that those aren't the important things. And so one of the things I do when I work with clients who are burned out, they love to talk about how they feel, because again, the damage is primarily emotional with burnout. And I let them talk about how they feel, and they tell me how they feel, and I'll listen empathetically and sympathetically. But then I'll look at them after they're done, and I say, okay, now you told me how you feel, and I think I've got it. Now, what do you want? And they just stare at me because they really haven't thought about what they want. And so goal setting is something I'm really big on. 3, 5, 10-year goals, and you need to reevaluate them every so often to make sure you're headed in the right direction, the direction you feel you should be going. And realizing that we do change as time goes by, so those goals should be updated and reevaluated and, adjusted so that you end up in your preferred future.
I think that's so true, and I agree with you. When I ask people, what do they want? They really don't know. And it's like, how do you create a vision board of what you want for your future if you really have no aspirations? And again, not having it be an external finish line. What's going to bring you joy? Here they told you all those feelings of disappointment and dissatisfaction. My marriage is falling apart, and the kids don't respect me, or I have no time with the kids. All those feelings, if we don't find out what it is that's going to make you happy and feel balanced and have a desire to get up and thrive and to make an impact on the world, then you're going to live a life that's very disappointing and very stressful, and potentially have that burnout that you're experiencing, that you're talking about. So,
Well, in the book, I've got several exercises, and there's a link in there you can download and print out a workbook. It's all the same questions that are asked in the book, but it's a larger format, using the entire page, so you don't have to write small. But you can print out the workbook and really answer the questions that are asked in there. And by the time you work through the book, you should have a clear picture of what your preferred future looks like. And the other thing I have folks do is a core values inventory. A lot of people know they have core values, but when you ask them what are they can name 1, 2, or maybe 3, but 5 is kind of pushing it. They have to search around a little bit and they're not sure. If folks have never done a core values inventory, I wholeheartedly recommend it, because when you go to make a decision, you want to make a decision that's in alignment with your core values. And if you do, the outcome is probably going to be better than if you dishonored your core values or you ignored them. So I see that quite a bit. That's another way people can burn themselves out, is that they do things repeatedly that are not in alignment with what they say they stand for or what they feel they stand for.
And part of that is because they haven't done the internal work. What is it they really desire? What is, that's aligned with their values for that season? And I that we talked about earlier, and I love that you also included a workbook in your book, a link for it. And I did too in my book, Powerful Beyond Measure, because for me, if you don't do this internal work, if you don't actually go through these exercises and these questions that we probe you in and encourage you to participate in, then you're not going to get the full value of what you're really desiring, why you're reading your book, why you're reading my book. And you've got to do the inner work, and no one can do it for you but you. You've got to take that time.
Not doing the work is tantamount to walking past a math book and expecting to learn math by just walking past it. You have to work problems. You have to practice. And so these exercises, when I would read a book and they would ask me questions when I was a lot younger, I would just skip over those and just keep going. And now that I'm older and a little wiser, hopefully, I've realized that they were trying to lead me on a journey, a journey within, to build self-awareness. And, only about one psychologist estimated that only 10 or 15% of the population is self-aware. The other 80% or 85% don't know what they want, who they are, what they stand for, what they're going to be doing, what they plan. They don't have any plans 3 years from now or 5 years from now. And so when we put these questions in a book, it's to lead you somewhere. And it's very instructive when you do. And so, I encourage people to, mark up the book and or print out the workbook and really tackle it. And you will walk away a different person.
You will. And I'd like to use the workbook because I say download it, do the workbook, and then put the date on it. Because like your book, like my book, it's a book that you can use as a resource and go back and do it a year later. And again, you're in a different season. You're able to reveal more to yourself and become more self-aware of the growth that you've made over that year. So we're continuing to evolve and be open to that awareness of what we want and desire as we continue to change and make impacts. And that kind of brings up, Clark, the next question. Can I call you Clark instead of doctor?
Yes, by all means.
Since we're not in the medical field right this moment.
That's right.
So that brings up, there's something that needs to be fixed. You need a change. You acknowledging something is impacting your life negatively, whatever it might be, and you now are aware of this, and you're trying to say, what do I do? So how hard or easy is that? And can you give a couple steps of what you think are instrumental in making that progress to that improvement?
Yes, change. Change is so hard sometimes because we get comfortable and complacent and all warm and fuzzy with what we think we know, And we know our job is secure. Well, is it? I mean, in my industry, people move around quite a bit. And I remember a friend of mine worked for a pharmaceutical company, and they had 2 mass layoffs within 20 years. And so it's not like it used to be where you would go to work for a company and retire on a pension. Um, so what is security? I mean, I'd rather be in charge of my own ship and my own destiny, and that means making decisions. And sometimes you have to make the uncomfortable decision, especially if you're burned out and you know your work environment's the cause and it's not going to change. You've tried, you've gone to administration and you've made suggestions, and they turn a deaf ear and things are just getting worse. You have to leave. You have to make a change. You have to decide that, yeah, what's out there is unknown to me, but so was this job before I took it. The problem is when you get in the burned out mindset, it's very resistant to change because people start placing obstacles in their own path. So you have to come to a conclusion that there's a problem. You have to be willing to address the problem, and you've got to be courageous enough to make the hard decision, which is change. And of course, a lot of times we don't because it's fear. We're afraid. We're afraid of the outcome. We're afraid of the uncertainty. But you never feel more alive when you're tussling with a decision concerning change, if you think about it. And
go ahead.
And all those times in your life when you thought, wow, this is the best thing in the whole wide world, it probably turned out to be, in the end, it probably wasn't very good for you. And the times that we really struggle and there was a lot of adversity and it was an uphill battle the whole way, and you struggled but you just kept pitching and working, the outcome was probably great. And so we have to, yeah, we have to, we only learn by trying different things, and then sometimes we make a mistake, and we learn from that, and we go on. So this whole notion of let's get into a comfortable lifestyle and just stay there, to me, is not only sounds boring, but after a while, it's very unsatisfying to most people.
Well, it becomes stagnant, and I think the word change, again, is really based on your perception of how you want to change, and it's, again, I like to put it back on the individual because your change for you may be very difficult, but for me, looking at the change that you might need to do could be very easy. So again, the change that we need to undergo ourselves are self-created, and they can be perceived as easy or difficult. It's what we choose to look at the solution to the way we're feeling right now. And this is a place of, for me, which aligns with my book, is empowerment, because you're in charge of your life. You're in charge of the change that you want to bring to your life. No one else should be in charge of your destiny and your outcome and how you're experiencing life. And when you step into your own power, then you can realize that you're not a victim. You're not the product of your external world and how you have had to fill it. You are now all of a sudden the captain of your ship, deciding what course do I want to take and traverse, and how do I want to experience the sights I'm going to see.
It's so true. I read a quote one time that said, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. And when you stop and think about how profound it is that you may be one decision away from everything you've ever wanted,
And but fear is really only your perception of it.
Right.
And so that's why, it doesn't have to be, I am afraid to go to that abyss, to jump over that abyss. It could be a small step. There's many steps to get to the final destination or the continuing journey. I always never say there's a destination. To me, there's never an end point. We continue to have seasons, right? And that's so right. To me, it's continuing to evolve and to want to change and experience life different as you continue to traverse your time continuum. And I think it's so important that, again, it's our perception of change and it's our perception of how we view it. And fear does not even have to be part of that. Because I've always told my kids, when they say, well, Mom, what decision should I make? What's the ultimate? I said, you have to learn to make your own decisions. And even if you falter and say, I wish I had made the other decision, that's great. And
So yeah, I think for some people it's a great terror just to walk out their door. It depends on what their situation is, and for other people, it they make snap decisions throughout their day without a second thought. With burnout, it's a little different because again, people get in that burned out mindset, and there is a lot of fear attached to that, mainly because people don't know what's wrong and they don't know how to make themselves feel better. But it's paramount that if people do find themselves in that kind of situation where they feel burned out, that they do something about it in spite of their fear or in spite of their reticence or their uneasiness with change, because that's the only thing that's going to make them better.
Right, exactly. And it's like when you're in that burnout mode, you're almost like that drowning victim, and you're just being sucked down. No matter how hard you try, the more you try, that you're swimming against the current. You're just going to, get sucked down more and more. You're going to try harder and harder, and you're just exhausting yourself. And so you're never going to be able to, thrive in that situation. And I think that's what I love about your book, is really gives you the power to understand that you are in that burnout mode, and then how do you take the power within yourself to really find and reignite your life and passion and purpose. And I think it's really so instrumental and so powerful, not just for the medical profession, but for anyone.
Well, there's an 8-step framework in there that is pretty simple. But again, if people work through it, they'll come out on the other side with a different mindset or a different view. And it may be just enough to get them to do what needs to be done a lot of times, which is a change of venue, a change of work venue.
And I know you medical professionals can go to a particular agency to get that kind of support. Do you want to speak on that?
Sure. Now, I'm medical director at the North Carolina Physicians Health Program. Most states, I think 42 states, have a physician's health program, a PHP. And they're there we work with physicians, PAs, which are physician assistants, pharmacists, farm techs, veterinarians, and vet techs. And so we see all those folks who they come to us with lots of different problems. Sometimes it's chemical dependency, opioids, alcohol, other drugs. Sometimes it's a behavioral problem. We've seen gambling addiction, sex addiction. I mean, you name it, we've seen it. There could be mental health issues like depression or bipolar disorder. And we see a lot of burnout. And in fact, a full third of what we see at its basis, there's burnout. And it's indirectly tied to burnout in another third. So it's very pervasive because when people burn out, sometimes they'll act out in an attempt to make themselves feel better. So most states have a functioning physician's health program to assist with providers who have gotten in trouble in one way or another. And it's a great safety net. You use the analogy of the life preserver. It really is a life preserver for providers in our state, and it puts their life back. We help get their life back together and get their license back if they lost it, once they do the work. So it's a great resource. It really is.
Well, your book is amazing, and it's really so pivotal and so important, not just for the medical professionals, but for others that can also take this information, these tools that you give them, resources you give them, to really change and transform their life, to really experiencing a life that's fun and enjoying and pleasurable and happy. And you're like, some people are saying, I don't know how to get there. And your book will help them get there, which is really a powerful tool.
everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants passion and purpose in their life. And for one thing's for sure, if you're burned out, you will never live a life of happiness or passion-driven purpose if you're burned out. So,
Okay.
it's really something you need to tuck away if you're experiencing those symptoms. And this book is not written just for medical professionals, any professional, because
Right.
the hallmarks are the same, the underlying causes are the same, the alleviating, mitigating, and eliminating steps or measures are all the same. So any professional, if you consider yourself a professional and you're burned out, this book will help you.
Well, I am so honored to be interviewing you today because your book's coming out tomorrow, I believe.
Yes, the official launch is tomorrow.
Congratulations. That's exciting. So why don't you tell our listeners here where they can find you, your website, as well as where they can find your book?
Well, my website is clarkgaither.com, or you can just type in dr.com. I'm also known as Dr. Burnout, so that's kind of my thing. But either one will get you to my website where I blog about professional job-related burnout. And also there are some free downloads. And also reignitebook.com. There are a lot of free downloads there for any professional. Reignitebook.com is the landing page for the book that's coming out tomorrow. And there's also a paperback, of course, and you can get this wherever books are sold, any online retailer or any bookstore.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I have really enjoyed speaking with you today and getting to know you, and I just think your book's amazing, and I think any tool that allows people to become more self-aware that they want to see a change in their life, that your book is a wonderful book of that self-discovery, but also how to resolve and eliminate that conflict, that over burnout that we've done to ourselves and our environment, and we have to take charge and make those remedies to it. Is there anything else you want to say to our listeners before we close?
Just thank you. Thank you so much. This has been fun. I really enjoyed it.
I do too. Well, I thank you very much. Again, I wish you great success with your book, and I'm sure you'll be speaking to a lot of medical professionals as well as other entrepreneurs or other businesses. And really, whether you're not even working, you're just trying to change your life, your personal life. This is the same thing, because personal lives, you can be burned out.
Absolutely.
And so this is a book that can impact every one of us. So I encourage you all, go and check it out. Check out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. They're everywhere. Whether you do it, there it is, Reignite. And I love the word reignite, because that's what is reigniting your purpose and your passion. And that's where you will experience joy and happiness and health.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
In that flow.
Thank you so much. This is Cynthia Mazzaferro with Dr. Gaither Clark, and it's just been wonderful. And again, much success to you. Take care.
Thank you.